Master the business of speaking with your hosts, Taylor, Austin, and Max. You're listening to Technically Speaking.
Welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking. Now, before we get started with this interview where Max, Austin, and I talk with Frank King about how to become a 5-time TEDx speaker, I wanted to provide a bit of a disclaimer. In today's episode, there are underlying themes of suicide and substance abuse as we unpack Frank's journey as the mental health comedian. So for any of you who may be triggered by that content, just know that's ahead on today's episode. Nonetheless, we hope you enjoy this one, and we'll see you in there.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Technically Speaking. We are so excited to be here. And we have with us today Frank King. And we are super happy to have him. Frank is a suicide prevention speaker and trainer and was a writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years. Now, for Frank, depression and suicide run in his family. He's thought about killing himself more times than he can count. He's fought a lifetime battle with major depressive disorder and chronic suicidality, and has turned that that long, dark journey into 5 TEDx talks. He's actually been invited to 7, but due to scheduling conflicts, wasn't able to attend to. So 5 TEDx talks sharing his life-saving insights on mental health awareness with associations, corporations, and colleges as well. Frank's a motivational public speaker who uses his life lessons to start the conversation, giving people permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding depression and suicide. So Frank, I know that was bio there. Super powerful topic. It is something that a lot of people struggle with. I think everybody has times in their life where they have feelings of depression. I don't think as many people get as extreme as you have, though. And for those that do, I mean, they need somebody to help relate, and to guide them through it and give them some hope. So I love that that's what you're all about. It's not primarily why we're here to have you speak to our audience, though. As I mentioned, 5 TEDx talks. That is incredible, to say the least, from Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Pensacola, Florida. I mean, you've done this all over the place. And I know this is a topic that a lot of people are curious about in the speaking world. I mean, TED is sort of like the peak of a mountain, I think, for a lot of people. It's certainly a milestone, right? So, Frank, I mean, to get us started here, I'm curious, like, how did you find yourself becoming a TEDx speaker? And I mean, I'm curious about how that translated into you being a coach as well. But
well, I started comedy actually the day after Christmas in 1985, right at the beginning of the comedy club boom, and my lovely wife, girlfriend at the time, and I went on the road. I did stand up. She came along for the ride. 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Didn't clean a bathroom in 7 years, and
which I wouldn't be too upset about. I don't know if you were at the time.
Yeah, no, I was thrilled, and I got to work with people who were just comics back then: Seinfeld, Dennis Miller, Rosie, Ellen DeGeneres, Jeff Foxworthy, Ron White. And back then, they put us up in a 3-bedroom, what they call the comedy condo. So we not only worked with them, we lived with them for a week at a crack. It was an amazing time to be in stand-up. Then that began to wind down, did some radio for a while, took a #1 morning show in my old hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina, took it to #6 in 18 months, one of my greatest accomplishments. Didn't just drive it in the ground, drove it in the middle earth. And then made the jump to the corporate comedy market because my comedy was always clean, speaking after dinner, after lunch. And rode that horse until 2007. Was making good money, like $5,000 for 45 minutes of clean corporate comedy. Of course, then the recession hit. We lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger. I know. I get a nervous laugh from the audience almost every time. Should we be laughing at this? And after that, and looking back at my family history, grandmother died by suicide, great aunt died by suicide, my mother, I thought, because I'd always wanted to be a speaker who was funny in addition to being a funny speaker, but I really thought I didn't have anything to teach anybody. And after that episode, I thought, you know what? I could teach suicide prevention. So I got some training. But the big deal was, and here's where TED comes in, I had to rebrand. because every meeting planner, every event planner, every speakers bureau thought of me as a funny guy. And so my wife goes, do a TEDx. And I said, what's a TEDx? Just so happened I got an application in the email, an email application. Would you apply to speak at the TEDx in Vancouver, BC? And I thought, sure. And I got it on my first try. And I came out on stage at age 56 as depressed and suicidal. Nobody knew. My family, my wife, my friends had no idea that I've been living with that all my life. And that allowed me to rebrand with the event planners, meeting planners, speakers bureaus. All of a sudden they realized, hey, he can talk about something serious. That talk, those big red letters, increased my visibility, marketability, and certainly credibility as a speaker who's serious. Now there's still humor in my presentations, but that was the beginning of the rebranding process. And then from that one, I got 2 phone calls the next couple of months, invited to do 2 more. Do you have another TEDx on a mental health topic? Yeah. My 4th one I applied for, and 5th one I applied for. And we'll talk about, I actually got those last 2 without an audition. I just applied for them, and they liked the title and subtitle idea so much, they just said, no, you're on. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, how that works.
That is incredible. So what year was the first time that you got on a TED stage?
2014.
2014.
Yep.
That's wild. It's interesting to me because, my whole life, I'm a young guy, obviously, and my whole life I've been watching TED Talks and, I've very much looked up to the people that are up there standing on stages and sharing their ideas. And for non-speakers, I think that in a lot of ways that seems to be sort of the top of the iceberg, like if you've done a TED Talk, you've made it as a thought leader. For you to share such a sensitive topic in such a big way, I think is awesome. You've probably helped a lot of people. So
yeah,
Frank, go
ahead.
I get an email every now and then, or a DM on Twitter for somebody who's seen it, just stumbled on it, and they live with mental illness and it made a large impact in there. Most people with mental illness feel like they're all alone. Nobody else thinks this way, and then they discover, wait a minute, that's other people do. So
definitely. What's crazy is that you just kind of mentioned this nonchalantly, but we're an entertainer for a while, corporate entertainer of sorts, and you had to go through a rebrand while making this happen and then landing TED Talks at the same time. And usually those things don't happen at the same time for somebody. It's like, okay, I'm going to rebrand and then I'll land some more gigs with that new brand and then maybe I'll get the TED Talk. What made you so powerful, do you think, to be able to handle the rebrand and land the TED Talks along with it? Why do you think you got so many opportunities to speak for TED all while going through all of that?
Well, I think, guys, something I learned years ago, decades ago at the National Speakers Association. Pick a lane.
Pick a lane. That's right.
I'm sure you guys teach this. I had a networking keynote, inspirational keynote. I had some cardiac issues, so I had a cardiac keynote. And I all of a sudden had this suicide prevention keynote. And I just thought, January 1st, 2018, I thought, you know what? I'm going to pick a lane. I'm just going to be a suicide prevention speaker. I'm going to become the mental health comedian. That's my brand. And that helped a great deal when I focused on one keynote, basically. And then after that, I focused my marketing. I looked at the top 10 occupations at risk for suicide. I thought, you know what? Because I tell my clients, you need an ideal client. And an ideal client in my mind is, and I bet you guys teach this, is somebody with an annual meeting that uses outside speakers, that has a budget that can handle my fee, and most importantly, they have a bleeding need for what it is I have to say. And so I chose dentists, veterinarians, physicians, construction, and safety managers. All of those people have annual meetings, money, use outside speakers, and all of those 5 groups are working very hard to bring down the rate of suicide in their particular occupation.
I didn't even know that those were industries where that is a problem. Especially like construction. Like that's one that I don't think anybody would ever think of if they didn't look at the data.
Number one. Construction is number one.
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, it's male heavy. 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the U.S. these days are men. And construction, rough and tumble guys are probably not going to be reaching out for help with their emotions. So that's and the thing about doing a TEDx for me was and I talked to my TEDx clients about this. Look, what are you passionate about? Because TED's all about passion. There's a book called Talk Like TED, and it's the 9 things that the author believes belong in every great TEDx talk or TED talk. And number 1 is passion. So from the moment we started working together, I'm driving them into a niche. Because if you're passionate about it, if it's organic to you, then I go to bed thinking about mental health. I wake up thinking about mental health. It's not like I have to force myself to move forward as a mental health speaker. It's just somebody said, "How'd you pick mental illness as a topic?" Well, the topic actually picked me.
That's usually how it goes.
For sure.
Yeah. And some of my clients, I've got a client with narcolepsy, and she's got a foundation a sleep foundation, and she's got a book on narcolepsy. And I spoke to a young woman. We signed her up this past weekend. She got a book. Her name's Liv, or Olivia. Her last name is Sain, S-A-I-N, coincidentally. And she has a bipolar disorder and a substance use disorder. And she wrote a book called Live to, I can't believe I've forgotten the book, Live to Tell. The book's called Live to Tell. And so it's not like when we first talked, it wasn't like, what am I going to talk about on the TEDx stage? She'd already written the book on it. And I said, well, Liv, here's the deal. That's the name of the book. That should also be the name of your TEDx talk. Do you have a tagline for your speaking? And somewhere in the conversation, she said this: hopelessness is just a visitor. I went, stop. That's the subtitle of your TEDx talk. Live to Tell. Hopelessness is just a visitor. And but it's organic to her. It's just, so that's not everybody has, a mental illness or narcolepsy or something that is actually chemically, genetically, but most people have a passion for something, and speakers especially.
It sounds like, as you're talking, Frank, that being able to stand up there with conviction, because you use the word organic, and it sounds like they really need to connect with it in a deep way. It's not like you've got all the time in the world on a TEDx stage. And it sounds like that conviction and that passion is really what has to come through to make it authentic, to make it impact the way that you want to see it impact people. Is that fair?
It is fair. I've got a client who is a dentist or retired dentist. She bought a practice that was crumbling. She saved it, built it up to an amazing practice, and then the last recession lost it all. And she speaks on, I think it's going to be, it doesn't matter how hard you hit rock bottom, it's how high you bounce. So she bounced back from that one, but before she bounced back, after it crashed and burned, she was too embarrassed to tell anybody. She was just devastated. So she found herself in her basement, standing on a stool with a noose around her neck. And her phone rang. And it was a patient who needed help. So she removed the noose, stepped off the stool, and back into her life. So, it gives me chills. Well, get this. I believe there should always be a dramatic moment, an aha, or force the audience to catch their breath. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a stool and put it off to one side, far enough away that it's not for water. And she's not going to address the stool until it's time to crawl up on it and mime she's hanging herself. And then we're going to have a sound effect from the back, from backstage, of the classic iPhone phone ringing sound. And let it ring 2, 3, 4 times until the audience inside their heads going, answer the phone. So we try to build in that. And, I don't think if it wasn't organic to you, if you weren't passionate about the topic, you would be acting.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I think your acting would show. But to her, she stood on that stool. She had the noose around her neck. She felt the rough, So I think that's what I try to find with my TEDx coaching clients, is that those moments live that I mentioned before, live to tell. She wanted to end her life. She got very drunk. She's in the kitchen deciding which kitchen knife to use, and a wooden block. She pulls out the kitchen knife. She remembers the feel of the cold steel on her neck, and she tells it that way. And of course she didn't go through with it, but she got that close. And so it's those are the kind of things I try to pull out of the coaching client.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of things that will move the audience, and then we add some humor, because if you can move them from pole to pole, make them cry and make them laugh in the same 12 to 18 minutes. You know the old story. They will not remember. They may not remember what you said, but they'll remember how they felt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it
So,
sounds
I like
like
this
that.
because
Go ahead, Austin.
oh no, it's just a quick comment. Like I like talking about this. I mean, because we don't dive into the stagecraft side of speaking all that often. I mean, we talk about it occasionally, but this theatrical element that you sort of bring into these conversations that you're having with the audience, essentially, it makes things so much more powerful and sort of becomes the brand at which you become known for. Like I was just thinking of Liv's book, Live to Tell.
yeah.
Is that
Mhm.
Live to Tell? I mean, it's such a cool brand that gets built into the very story that she's moving audiences with, you know? And so there's a business case to be made for what you're saying too, is my only point.
Well, when
Yeah.
I talked to Liv, I said, look, that's the name of your book. Have you bought live2tell.com? No. Well, let's buy it right now while I'm on while we're on the Zoom. So she went to GoDaddy, bought live2tell.com. I said, do you have a podcast? No. Well, you're going to have a podcast, and it's going to be called, wait for it, Live to Tell. So what you're doing is you're branding.
Brand consistency.
I selected that brand for that evening. But that'll be her podcast, her URL, her TEDx talk, her book.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's so I give a little bit of that. What I want to do is, by the time they record the TEDx and then it goes up on YouTube, I want to have all those things in place, the branding and the podcast, so that we can monetize as best we can when the YouTube video launches. So they're in a position at that point to begin accepting speaking engagements.
Definitely. One of the things that you've mentioned, it was a little earlier on, but you have this case to be made about really picking a lane and having an ideal client and then sticking with that through and through, your brand consistency. And I think this is one of the biggest areas the biggest mistakes that we see speakers and other thought leaders make is kind of that kind of broadness to their talks or their services or the people that they serve. And then you kind of end up with this brand inconsistency, basically, that more or less confuses people and makes it kind of feel like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain when you're trying to sell or get engagements or, just have more in your business and people coming inbound to you. And it really sounds like what you help people do is really unlock that passion, that ideal client profile, that lane. And I mean, that's obviously one of the biggest mistakes. And I think we are coming at it from a slightly different perspective, because it sounds like some of the people you work with, they might have already been a published author, or maybe, and I don't know what percentage of people are actually established professional speakers before saying, hey, we want to land a TED Talk. But a lot of the clients we work with, they're established professional speakers who, have been working in the corporate space or the association space for a while. And they're like, no, I want to do a TED Talk now. I feel like it's going to heighten my exposure and it's going to, more credibility and kind of everything you said at the beginning. And we kind of went through in depth one of those mistakes people make, which is not having a lane specific enough and clear enough to be getting that TED Talk in the first place. I'm kind of curious about the other mistakes people make when landing a TED Talk. We have a bunch of listeners on this podcast right now figuring out how to land that TED Talk. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're looking for a TED Talk and applying to one?
Well, and I've spoken to a number of what they call curation teams. Those are people in the committee, at the event, that will decide who gets the audition, who goes on stage. And what they've told me is the number one thing that gets you thrown into the no pile immediately is too much. Too much. Brevity is the soul of wit and also the soul of a good TEDx application. Too many words in the description of your idea, too many ideas sometimes, too much of anything. And I work very hard with my clients, and some of Most of the TEDx applications ask you for your idea in one of three ways: a 10-word elevator pitch, a title, subtitle, or 2 sentences. And when I tell my coaching client they've got to boil their idea down to 10 words, they probably have a hernia. I can't. Well, there's a trick we use. Well, let's start with the title, subtitle. So Liv and I did that. Live to tell. Hopelessness is just a visitor. Okay, Liv, that is your less than 10-word elevator pitch. So just take the title and the subtitle, run them together, put a comma in the middle, and that's your 10-word elevator pitch. And then 2 sentences. But again, the thing that will kill a TEDx application faster than anything else is they open it up and it's just, the person hasn't gone through the process of boiling it down to what the TEDx curation team is looking for. I spend a great deal of my time with my coaching clients editing and pulling things out that don't move the narrative forward. So number one is just flat too much of whatever will get you.
I'm curious. Do you think that that's because having too much fluff, I guess we'll say, is an indication that they haven't distilled the idea that they want to share enough? Or is it also like the application thing where you're trying to get a job and you keep your resume to 1 page because the person who's reading it just doesn't have the time to read more and they would rather just throw that one in the trash and move on to the next person than try to read more than they have to? Or maybe it's both.
I think it's both. And here's the thing, and I've told comics this many times. With comedians, I'm coaching a comic, and he's got 1 F word in his entire act. I go, look, here's the deal. 1 F word is not going to get you the job, and it will keep you from getting a job. The person who's booking comedians and the people who are booking TED Talk, they've got a lot of applications to go through. They're not looking for the first reason to book you. They are looking for the very first reason not to book you so they can throw you in the no pile and, go on to the next 49 applications they were given. Everybody got 50 and, oh, God. So, yeah, you cannot give them any reason to throw you in the no pile. And again, brevity, being concise, and what you said, Austin, they're probably suspecting if you wander around, verbally, you probably haven't got a real solid idea of what your idea we're spreading it.
Right. That's just a valuable rule for life itself, I think. If we can learn to say what we want to say in less words, that's better for everybody.
Yeah, and I think what you said too about what the TED curators go through, it's very much like what your decision makers go through when you're selling a corporate and association gig, you're pitching, you're speaking, you're consulting, you're training, whatever you might do outside of this. Everything you've outlined and what it sounds like is a lot of these exercises that you walk people through when you're discovering their passion and then making their ideas super concise. That's immediately translatable not only just to more TED Talks, but to actually selling those services to companies and associations to continue the engagement. It sounds like these are very transferable. And it sounds like the curators are going through a very similar experience to what decision makers are going through. They're just looking for the first reason not to book you so they can move on and get to the next thing.
Yes, and if you boil it down for TEDx Talk, then on your website, for verbiage, you've whacked away everything that doesn't move your business narrative forward. And you know how people are nowadays; they skim before they read.
Yeah.
So if it's bullet points, short, concise bullet points. If your tagline is, hopelessness is just a visitor, small, very digestible, as few characters as possible chunks. So you're not making the event planner or meeting planner work too hard. And one of the benefits of doing the TEDx is you have boiled your idea down to 12 to 18 minutes. And then I tell them, look, now what we got to do is expand it to 45 to 60 for your keynote. So, but some people come to me with a keynote and some people come to me just with the 12 to 18 minutes. And to tell a speaker they need to boil their 45-minute keynote down to 12 to 18 minutes. Again, the look on their face, I can't. Well, that's my job is to edit, because they're married to their material. They love their stuff. But and all talks aren't 18. Between 12 and 18 minutes, you can't go more than 18. But the last one I did was 12, and I've done a 15 and an 18. So it's a lot of what I do is editing them, figuring out what has to stay and what has to go.
Yeah. Super helpful.
We work in a space where we're coaching people all the time, and I'm laughing a little bit as I'm listening to you, because you're talking about you have to say, okay, that's awesome, make it 12 to 18 minutes. So sometimes you have to have those tough conversations. I'm just curious, as a coach, I mean, do people come to you when they're getting started, or do they find that they try on their own? Or just from a coaching perspective, when do people usually come to you and find you? And do they stumble their way there, or is it like a beeline for you because they just get it?
I would say it's about half and half. And one
Okay.
mistake you can make, one of those 6 mistakes you can make to kill your chance of landing a TEDx talk, is you apply a couple times, you give up.
Mm-hmm.
About half my clients apply a couple times on their own and just, why bother? Or they just apply for the one in their town. I tell them, look, I've never had a TEDx that I didn't have to fly to. You're never a prophet in your own hometown. I mean, some people do. I mean, there's one in Eugene where I live. There's several in Portland. One of these days, I'm going to be able to drive it. But so far, I've had to fly everywhere I spoke. So people about half of my clients have tried and given up, and the other half have not tried. And I do quite a bit of social media marketing, looking for speakers, authors, coaches, and Toastmasters. Most of those people want a TEDx talk. Probably half of them have taken a shot at it. But each one wants it for a different reason. The author wants to get the word out about the book. The coach, they've been told by John Maxwell or whoever they're coaching from, you should have a TED talk. Trainers, same thing. It's kind of coach like coaches and speakers, of course, for credibility. Now, here's the thing about speakers. The TEDx folks have tumbled to the fact that a lot of speakers want TEDx talks for a demo. So they get a lot of applications from speakers. So we have to be very careful. If somebody's got a motivational speech, we cannot send in an application with a motivational speech, because they say oftentimes in the rules and regs of the TEDx, we don't want any motivational speeches. So what they're paying me for is to hide the vegetables. It's a motivational speech, but you don't know that. You're eating the meat. You don't even notice the vegetable. You say it without saying it so that you get your point across. Because again, a motivational speech, 9 out of 10 times is going to pitch right in the no pile because they don't want motivational speech.
I think that goes for any business too. And it wasn't always that way. For a long time, people got hired just to be entertainers. We've heard this from the veterans of the speaking space, where 20, 30 years ago, you could get hired if you were just a speaker and somebody could vouch for your ability to wow an audience. But we've heard that especially during the 2008 crisis, the companies and the organizations that were hiring speakers switched to be much more focused on solutions and experts that could solve problems rather than just simply entertainment. And since then, I think that's gotten increasingly more and more true. And even in 2020 with COVID coming in, I mean, people have budgets to hire speakers, but if they're not solving a specific problem, then it's much harder to justify spending that money for an organization. So I guess all I'm saying is the philosophy behind what it is that you're bringing to the table does need to be deeper than I'm just here to inspire the audience. I'm here to solve a specific problem. And it sounds like that's true for TEDx right now as well.
Yes, and what I tell my students or somebody considering it is I help them find the application links, and I just sent out a dozen application links to my current coaching clients. It's a good time to apply, by the way, because a lot of people think the TEDx talks are not happening. The ones for the fall have pretty much been postponed to next fall. But I sent out 12 links yesterday to TEDx's that they think are going to be live in February and March. So it is a great time to, and I tell people, look, if you get the audition, it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 minute video overview or a 5-minute Zoom overview with the curation team. And undoubtedly, they're going to ask you this question as soon as you get done with your 5 minutes in the Q&A. Okay, what are you going to teach our audience? So you have to have those learning objectives, able tos, how tos ready. I have my clients construct an email. with 3 to 6 learning objectives, how to, able tos, so that when the committee asks, because they're all about what is my audience going to learn? What can they do after they heard you speak they couldn't do before they heard you speak?
Sure.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many ties. It's funny as we're talking here, so many ties to just, applying to TED, speaking at TED, and just selling yourself as a thought leader to companies and associations. And we've been talking largely about these 6 things, the mistakes that people make when they go after a TED Talk. And I know you have an awesome PDF that we're going to be sharing with the group in the show notes to all of our listeners. But Frank, we're all about, creating value for the audience, of course. And I know you have this lead magnet. What else are you working on that, our audience can benefit from?
Yeah, so I'm working on a course with you guys, an online on-demand course to, how to get a TEDx talk. Can I share one other dramatic moment, my favorite dramatic moment from my, and I've yet to do this in a TEDx, but it's coming.
Sure.
I did it on stage at a showcase for a dental group. In the United States, 1 person dies by suicide every 11 minutes. And so what I do, and I had no PowerPoint, I just had a countdown clock, like a countdown clock on a bomb on the screen. As soon as I hit the stage, they start the countdown clock. Mm-hmm. And I don't address it. I just let it go, let it count. And at some point in the talk, like the 10-minute, 30-second point, I say to them, listen, the good news is you can make a difference, you can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that's starting a conversation. And I turn the screen and go before their time runs out, and they stop it at 7 seconds. So the entire time I'm talking, they're watching me, watching the clock, watching me, watching the clock. They want, is it going to let it go to 0 and let the guy die? Or is it going to stop the clock? So I've got them. And when I got done with it, they're standing, they're crying, they're clapping. I just sensed it would work. I'd never tried it before, and it just blew the roof off. So those are the moments that I'm looking for the coaching clients. And I speak on suicide prevention, as you guys know, generally as a workplace health and safety issue. And the ROI, the why for me, why do that? I have something called chronic suicidal ideation. It's rare. And almost every time I speak, every time but one that I've spoken, there's been somebody in the audience who has that. And they don't know it has a name. They just think they're some kind of freak. And I had a young woman come up after a college presentation, and she goes, I want to thank you for your keynote. I said, you're welcome. She goes, but I got to tell you, it made me weep. How did it make you weep? I've got a story in there about how, for me and people like me, suicide is always a solution for problems large and small. And so small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. That is chronic suicidal ideation in a nutshell. So she says to me, Frank, when you told that story about your car, get it fixed, buy a new one, you could just kill yourself. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. I did not know it had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak. She goes, when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I'm not alone, and I wept. That's my why. That's why I do what I do. Because maybe I've steered her far enough off the path to suicide that she'll live a normal life. It occurred to me, I'm sort of like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown what these people's lives would be like if I weren't there to speak and go, hey, you're not alone.
Sure.
Second thought was, now I can't kill myself, because if I did, I would take all those people with me who never got a chance to hear me speak.
That's right.
So yeah, my passion is obviously suicide prevention speaking, and the TEDx have allowed me as a comedian to move that forward by helping me with the rebrand, to give people the idea that yes, you can say something serious, talk about something serious, but you can also, it's a lot more digestible if you have a laugh or two in there.
Absolutely.
And we're so glad that you're here to share that too. For our listeners to know that there's always somebody out there that you can talk to, even if it's us. If you're listening to this, you probably know us. Come talk to us. I mean, get help if you need it. This is an important discussion.
Can I give you one last thing I think kills a lot of TEDx applications?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, go for it.
Lack of creativity.
Sure.
And that can come from hiring the wrong coach. A friend of mine hired another coach before I met her for a tremendous amount of money. And they cobbled together an application, basic application that she could use to fill in the blanks on, because the questions repeat. And she called me, she goes, Frank, I've applied 80 times. 80? 80. Nothing. No auditions, no bookings. So I said, well, let me see the stuff they created for you. And it was okay. All the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, but it didn't really sing. It didn't really. So I said, do you mind if I work it over? She goes, no. I worked it over. Within 5 applications, she got TEDx Boston.
Wow.
It's all about the title, subtitle, elevator pitch, description. If we can hook them with the title and make it title should be something where, you don't quite understand the title, so you have to read the subtitle to get it explained to you. And then the idea seems good enough if you read the description. And then after that, you want to read the next paragraph, which is usually, why is this the person to deliver that? And if I can get them there, then there's a good chance you'll get an audition. The last 2 talks I did, this is where creativity comes in and hiring the right coach. The second to last talk I did was called Suicide, the Secret of My Success. Counterintuitive, interesting. Dead Man Talking, which is a play on words, the movie Dead Man Walking. And I got that. They called me and I go, audition? They go, no, you're on. Okay. I'll skip the audition. Thanks. The next one, the last one I did, TEDx Durango, Colorado. The title was Mental Health and the Orgasm, Treat Your Depression Single-Handedly.
There you go.
Wow.
I had to apply 16 times because I knew not every curation team is going to like that idea.
Yeah.
But somebody is going to really like it. And sure enough, I got a phone call and they said, listen, Frank, I said, do you want me to audition? They go, no, no, you're on. We'll see you in Durango. So it occurred to me after that, that's sort of the linchpin of the process, is having somebody working with you who can create things like that. 20 years with the Tonight Show, 34 years as a comic, who can create something that will grab them by the lapels and not let go until you get the audition. So it's I think that really is the heart of the what I do, is that creative element.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that, Frank. And it's honestly been just such a pleasure to have you on today. For everyone listening, Frank has been nice enough to give us a PDF, a downloadable 6 things that'll kill your chances at landing a TEDx talk. So feel free to go grab that in the show notes. There will be a link below. And if you want more awesome resources like this, don't forget to subscribe and go to speakerflow.com/resources. Thank you so much for chiming in. I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsor, Auxbus. Auxbus is the all-in-one suite of tools you need to run your podcast. And it's actually what we run here at SpeakerFlow for Technically Speaking. It makes planning podcasts simple. It makes recording podcasts simple. It even makes publishing podcasts to the masses simple. And quite honestly, Technically Speaking wouldn't be up as soon as it is without Auxbus. Thank you so much, Auxbus. And if you are interested in checking Auxbus out, whether you're starting a podcast or you have one currently, get our special offer, auxbus.com/speakerflow, or click the link below in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in today. Check the show notes for more info and see you next time. Later.